Hi, my name is Doris Hall-Gulati, and I'm coming to you today as part of the LSO Musicians at Home series. My position in the Lancaster Symphony Orchestra is sort of a very long name. It is Assistant Principal Clarinet / Principal Bass Clarinet / Utility. Hence why I'm surrounded by so many of my clarinet and saxophone friends, and I'm going to try to give you just a little taste of what my life is like when I'm in the orchestra or as a soloist, and the diversity of what I am able to give to others and give myself with this position. Should first say there are some questions that you may have. I'm going to try to talk very little about myself, but I'm going to talk a little to give you some background. I am from Lancaster County, and I still live here, and I began the clarinet in the 4th grade as part of the music education system at Lancaster High School. Lancaster School District, not high school. I ended up there in the end. I began in 4th grade, like I said. I did not have a choice about my instrument. I have 2 brothers who are basically another generation ahead of me. And my parents said that if I wanted to play an instrument, I would have to choose between one of those. Being that one was the trombone, and I'm not a big person now, so you can imagine in 4th grade I certainly wasn't somebody who could probably reach the trombone. So I took the clarinet, and when I was 10 years old, I said I wanted to be a clarinetist. So went right from there, and here I am. I went on from Lancaster High School to Peabody Conservatory and then to the University of Michigan. From there, I was very lucky. I started my career right away, and I have had a fantastic run. I could not be more lucky and blessed to do what I've done over several years. I do sometimes play some other instruments. My primary instruments are clarinets, but I also play the pianos over here. You probably can't see in here. I wouldn't say I really play it, but I'm certainly a good faker. I also play things from the flute family, the flute, the alto flute, and the piccolo. But today we will not be exploring that, as that is not part of my position at Lancaster Symphony. One of the questions that came up too was, how much do you practice every day? Well, like an athlete, I need to keep all of these muscles in shape. So several hours a day I do need to put into, no matter what the clarinets are, the tenor, the saxophones, I do need to keep myself up, and that includes the muscles not just for dexterity and not just my mouth, my embouchure, which, for example, I use my mouth. This is a single reed instrument, and it's an in-mouth instrument. If you could think of it this way, it takes 80 muscles just to smile. So imagine the different muscles it takes me forming my embouchure the way I form it around here, and also the use of my tongue, being that the tongue is the strongest muscle in the body, not the heart. So for my articulations, the way I begin it, so what I do is the use of my tongue. So I definitely have to keep in shape. If I were to get out of shape, it does take a long time to get back in. It is possible at any age, believe it or not, as long as you're in great health. But I do need to also, for my heart and my lungs, I do need to stay in shape. One of the other questions that came up was, what is the coolest venue that you've ever performed in? Well, I have a trio Glavino, who was blessed enough to be able to get some Fulbright grants, and we were able to tour a lot. And one of the greatest venues that we performed in as a trio was in the Mozarteum in Salzburg. And Mozarteum being and being Salzburg was the home of Mozart and where the museums are, there is a chamber music hall there that is absolutely glorious. It's like being in the woods, but not. It's just behind you as you're performing, there are open windows and this fantastic view of the woods and the flowers and the sky. And it's just, you feel so connected, and you just feel, it's a beautiful feeling. There is a similar hall in the Philadelphia area at Swarthmore College called Lang Auditorium. That too is it's actually in the woods, and it's beautiful, and I've been lucky enough to play there several times. There is something about connecting with nature that if you feel like you're connecting, sometimes that makes you feel even more connected with the earth and what you're doing and creating your art. I will say probably one of the biggest thrills of my life was my New York debut in Lincoln Center, which is Geffen Hall now, but was Avery Fisher. That is probably a moment I hope I never forget. That playing, and I've done several times in an orchestra now, and Avery Fisher once a year for New Year's Day I get to play there, and every time I go back to it, I always have that very, very beautiful memory. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, speaking of memories, there was another question about what is a song or piece you can say that makes you happy? Well, first off, I should say that I listen to several different types of music. I love rap, I love country, I love jazz for sure, I love rock, I like heavy metal. I pretty much like everything. So when you said the word happy, it immediately makes me think of pop, the current pop artist who's still alive, Pharrell Williams, and his song Happy. That was, when that came out a few years ago with the videos, that really did make me happy. And it was a wonderfully positive light. At the same time, a group like Earth, Wind & Fire from the 70s and 80s, they had a song I loved, Fantasy. The group America, which was very popular in the 60s and 70s, I don't even know if I remember was around for a lot of their inception of their songs, but they had a song, A Horse with No Name. It's one of those songs I love. There's just so many. Speaking of country music, not a happy memory, but a fantastic piece for me is Prison Folsom Blues by Johnny Cash. So everything, I like everything, but I am happy to come here today as a member of the Symphony Orchestra and the classical music. I want to continue going onward with the A clarinet. Now, this is the B flat clarinet that I was playing for you. A clarinet, a little longer. A is a half step lower in pitch. The clarinet is very famous for us in a lot of our orchestra repertoire. But it's also very famous to a lot of people because Mozart has a clarinet concerto he wrote later in his life for the Basset clarinet in A. Now, I talked about the A clarinet, the soprano clarinet, but he actually wrote originally a concerto for this instrument, the Basset horn, but upon conversing with his very good friend Anton Stadler, they decided that, yes, Mozart, that was his favorite instrument, and he wanted to write for that, but he needed an instrument that went much higher. So, but he also wanted to keep the low notes. So Anton Stadler, his good friend, said, look, this would be great on the A clarinet, and it would be in a great key and comfortable for the musician finger-wise, but you want lower notes. I need to go to my clarinet maker and have him design a clarinet that will get you those notes. Hence, the Basset clarinet. If you look here, if you look at the bottom, since I have the mouthpiece on, you'll see many more keys, longer. There's even keys back here, similar to like a bassoon. So what I want to do is I'm going to play with another COVID-19 orchestra, socially distant for sure. I'm going to play some of this concerto, the last movement, the rondo, and partway through, I'm going to switch to that clarinet, the Basset clarinet, so you can hear me go into the very low range as well, and to why he would have wanted that. give you an idea of those lower notes. Also, this particular piece, I actually was soloist on the Basset clarinet with the Lancaster Symphony some years ago. I kind of have a hard time playing it on this clarinet anymore. I kind of want to do it on the original instrument, and I'm very lucky to own one. From here, I want to stay kind of in the soprano basset area, and I want to go onwards, and let me say upwards, to the E-flat soprano, almost sopranino clarinet. Now, this clarinet has also been around since the inception, as there were many clarinets in many different keys at the time, when we all started around the end of Telemann's era. This little clarinet often comes in handy in the orchestra for when we want something very super high, or very something shrill, or something of character. For instance, Hector Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, in the very last movement, The Witch's Sabbath, opens with the E-flat clarinet giving that theme. That kind of thing. Or Richard Strauss's Till Eulenspiegel, because there are merry pranks going on here at the end of the entire piece, after interjecting the E-flat clarinet here and there, ends with a very cadenza-like solo from very low in the instrument to very high. So I wanted to stop, it goes down from there, but I wanted you to hear from very low to very high. This instrument is definitely different than the Basset clarinet. So I'm going to play just a teeny bit of the Johann Molter concertos. He wrote 4 concertos for the D clarinet, which is slightly longer, but very interchangeable with the E-flat clarinet. This, to me, sounds more like sort of late Vivaldi and maybe something on a piccolo trumpet. So, something around the time of Mozart, even before, but yet very different sounding. We're going onwards to something I mentioned slightly earlier, the basset horn, which is really what the concerto was written for. This instrument is known in several writings written by Mozart to say that this was his favorite instrument. So much so that in his Requiem, which he never even got to finish, his last work, the top instrument in the woodwind section, which is where I'm from, flutes, oboes, clarinet, bassoons, is actually the basset horn. It is basset horns and bassoons, and they go from there in brass. I mean, it's haunting. He loved this instrument. It too had a huge range, even huger than something like the E-flat. When we think of it, it actually has 4 octaves. Huge range. Still didn't go high enough in what he wanted to do with it, Mozart wanted to do. But he did write several things for the basset horn, the Requiem. There are arias in many of his operas, included famous arias with a soprano where the basset horn is playing with them or has the solo line before or at the same time as accompanying. Serenades, there was one very famous one, the Grand Partita, incorporates basset horns. What I'm going to play today is actually from Beethoven, early Beethoven, and he wrote the Creatures of Prometheus ballet. And there is a movement that is dedicated to basset horn and then some oboe interjections. They go back and forth with the theme. There's even a little cadenza that brings in the basset horn, or a solo, very rhapsodic and out of tempo solo that brings in the whole theme. I'm going to play a little bit of this just so you get a little flavor of the basset horn. oboe takes the theme. Then we have the rest of the slow section. We get into the fast section, or the allegretto of this, and goes back and forth, and I want to play a little bit of that. It's super cool. It gets a very bad rap, sort of like bad viola jokes and bad E-flat clarinet jokes, where the E-flat clarinet is the sister to that, and we have that a lot in bands. But it really is an interesting sound, very hollow. And the funny thing is it's in the key of F, and it's called a horn, but it's nothing like the French horn was in the key of F, and it's really not a horn at all. It's kind of like the English horn, which is in the oboe family, is not a horn either. But we do have this cool bell. So, onward to this bad boy, one of my faves, the bass clarinet. Now, as I said about my position, one of the parts of it is principal bass clarinet. So I love this instrument. I'm glad that I got into it right out of grad school. I never had any instruction on it. I just fell in love with it. Maybe it's like the little dog, big dog syndrome. I'm not sure, because I'm kind of little and this instrument's almost as big as me. So I'm not sure what it is, but I love it. I love the sound. It's amazing. It can cross into everything. I was saying earlier something to my husband about the fact that it's everywhere. It's in movies. It's in classical music. It's in jazz. It's in rock. It's in everything, heavy metal, there's some stuff. But here's an example of something I think you'll all recognize. Never fear, when there's something ominous, the bass clarinet is going to be there. Bass clarinet, contrabass clarinets, which sadly I don't own, so I don't have it here to play. Another super cool instrument. But bass clarinet can be gorgeous and be lovely, such as in Verdi's Aida, opening into the fourth act. Obviously very different from what I played with the Jaws theme. Also, Graffes on the Trail, Grand Canyon Suite on the Trail, like the donkey, the picture of the donkey coming down when it take people down the trail. Again, very different. I brought a couple of other things too as well to play just a little bit. A friend of mine, John Carbon, wrote some great fantasy pieces that we recorded and now are published as well, the pieces published, for me and for my friend Steve Graff. And I just want to play a little of this theme because I'm also going to get into a lot of the extra notes down here. Something interesting. Again, you know, Mysterious Dark was what John wrote, so he wanted that. I mean, the bass clarinet is so versatile. Eugene Boltzow wrote this fantastic competition piece called Ballade, and I'm going to play just a little bit of the allegro, the very end of it, just so you can hear how the bass clarinet can be very virtuosic as well. So, just a little bit into that part of my world. Bass, very lucky I've gotten to do some fantastic new works, and just so happy that I have the opportunity to play this in the Lancaster Symphony. Now we're going to the utility part of my life at times, which in this case involves a lot of times saxophones. I've done this a lot with LSO. And interestingly enough, the saxophone was only invented in 1841. Now, when it was invented, it was considered most definitely a classical instrument. It wasn't until 1914 that the saxophone was introduced to jazz at all. So there are many, in particular French and Russian composers, who wrote parts for saxophones in their repertoire in the orchestra. The first thing I'm going to play is something by Maurice Ravel, who he orchestrated Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, which is originally for piano. And this movement is called The Old Castle. And he definitely was thinking about the colors. Ravel already thought about colors of instruments, whether it's the shimmery flutes or the very present oboes or the haunting dark sounds of the clarinet family. And he wanted a saxophone for this in particular. And I'll just play you just a bit of this. Switching from instrument to instrument this quickly is a little bit different than usual. Yeah, again, just one of the most beautiful things he's written. It's beautiful, goes on a little more than that, and actually ends the saxophone fading into nothing, overlooking that castle and all the memories. Another saxophone. Oh, and I should mention, you probably noticed that doesn't kind of look like a normal saxophone, in that most of the time people think of saxophones as brass and gold. That has a special lacquer on it to change the sound, to maybe keep it more warm. Quite frankly, as long as it plays, I don't care what it looks like. But it's a beautiful sounding saxophone, I think, so, and it's been very versatile for me. So that, my particular one is a gunpowder sort of metal look. My soprano saxophone looks a little bit like kind of a bloated metallic clarinet, but it's not. It's definitely a saxophone. And Shostakovich, in the 1930s, wrote, very prolific composer, wrote a piece called the Suite No. 1 for Jazz Orchestra. And in this piece, he has a very prevalent soprano sax part. And also I should go back to Ravel, who was one who orchestrated for Mussorgsky. Ravel put saxophones in plenty of his works, Rachmaninoff too, put the soprano sax in Bolero. Everybody knows that dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, and then the theme comes in, several instruments taken through the orchestra, unbelievably popular piece, and the soprano sax is one of them. So now I'm just going to play a little of the waltz from Suite No. 1 for Jazz Orchestra by Shostakovich. idea of that sound. Of all the sounds I've played today and colors and interesting, this one's a little different. Very, it's a wide bore. It's oddly not cylindrical. Many of the instruments look very cylindrical. It's still a single reed. I have a reed on a mouthpiece of ligature, but it travels out and it definitely goes outward like a cone. It's definitely a different type of sound. Similar to the alto sax, but very much higher. So that's kind of coming to the end of what I'm going to talk about today as far as the instruments, and just give you a little taste, hopefully a good enough taste of what it's like to be in my shoes sometimes, and what I love to do. I will say that I do want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of this organization continuing on, and we musicians, it's wonderful to be able to play with Music Minus One and still be able to make music and have this, but it's not the same as us being together. We want to be back together, and we know the patrons and your friends and our colleagues, they want to come and hear the symphony again. So we're hoping that very much so that we all come together in whatever way we can to make sure that the long history of the Lancaster Symphony and the incredible opportunities that it has afforded the musicians and their audience will continue. We wouldn't want to think that Louis Weiner and Stephen Gunzenhauser's work to create this great orchestra has fallen short in any way, because they have worked very hard over the last 60 to 70 years, and whatever we all can do to help to make this continue, we should try as hard as we can. I am going to finish today by playing a little bit of a sonata by a super amazing American composer, Leonard Bernstein. And I chose this, speaking of happy, it reminds me, he wrote this very young for his friend while he was at Juilliard when he was 18, and it reminds me a lot of some of the themes coming in the West Side Story. So again, a little bit at the end of his sonata for clarinet and piano. You're gonna have to bear with me just one second while I find it on my COVID buddy here. Close. There we go. I want to thank you for spending time with me today. I hope that you stay safe and healthy. And again, don't forget about the Lancaster Symphony Orchestra. We're ready to come back and be part of this community. Thank you again. Stay healthy.